Lizzie Andrew Borden was an American woman who was tried and acquitted in the 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts. The case was a cause car copyright libre throughout the United States. Following her release from the prison in which she had been held during the trial, Borden chose to remain a resident of Fall River, Massachusetts, for the rest of her life, despite facing significant ostracism. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts elected to charge no one else with the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden. Speculation about the crime still continues more than 100 years later. Background. Despite being the descendant of wealthy, influential area residents, Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew Jackson Borden, grew up in very modest surroundings and struggled financially as a young man. He eventually prospered through the manufacture and sales of furniture and caskets and went on to become a successful property developer who directed several textile mills including the Globe Yarn Mill Company, Troy Cotton, and Woolen Manufacturing Company. He also owned considerable commercial property and was both president of the Union Savings Bank and a director of the Derby Safe Deposit and Trust Company. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at $300,000. Despite his wealth, Andrew was known for his frugality. For instance, the Borden home lacked indoor plumbing on its ground and first floor and was located near Andrew's businesses. Although the residence was located in an affluent area, the wealthiest residents of Fall River, Massachusetts, which included Andrew Borden's cousins, generally lived in a more fashionable neighborhood that was farther away from the industrial areas of the city and much more homogeneous racially, ethnically, and socio-economically. Lizzie and her older sister, Emma Lenora Borden, had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lizzie was very involved in activities related to her church, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to America. She also was involved in Christian organizations such as the Christian Endeavor Society, for which she served as secretary-treasurer, and contemporary social movements such as the Women Unregistered Trademark Christian Temperance Union. She was also a member of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. During the inquest, the Bordens' live-in maid Bridget Sullivan testified that Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with their parents. During further police questioning, and during the inquest, Lizzie stated that she called her stepmother Mrs. Borden, and demurred on whether they had a cordial relationship. In May 1892 Andrew, believing that pigeons in the barn were attracting local children to hunt them, killed the pigeons with a hatchet. Lizzie had recently built a roost for the pigeons and was upset at their deaths. A family argument in July 1892 prompted both sisters to take extended vacations in New Bedford. Returning to Fall River the week before the murders, Lizzie chose to stay in a Fall River rooming house for 4 days before returning to the family residence. Tension had been growing in the family in the months before the murders, especially over Andrew's gifts of real estate to various branches of Abby's family. After their stepmother's sister received a house, the sisters demanded and received a rental property which they purchased from their father for $1. They then sold the property back to their father for $5,000. The night before the murders, John Vinicum Morse, the brother of Lizzie and Emma's deceased mother, Sarah Anthony Borden, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew. Some writers have speculated that their conversation, particularly about property transfer, may have aggravated an already tense situation. For several days before the murders, the entire household had been violently ill. A family friend later speculated that mutton left on the stove for use in meals over several days was the cause, but Abby had feared poisoning, as Andrew Borden had not been a popular man. It should be noted that the Bordens did have an icebox, and some historians feel that the hot weather at the time makes it unlikely it was not used. Murders. Abby Derby Gray Borden, although cleaning the guest room was one of Lizzie and Emma's regular chores, John Morse had slept in the room the previous night, and Abby had gone up to the room to make the bed. According to the forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was struck on the side of the head with a hatchet which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor, which created contusions on her nose and forehead. Her killer is then assumed to have sat on her back and delivered 19 direct hits to the back of her head. Andrew Jackson Borden, 1 year before the murders, the family home had been invaded, and items and cash were stolen from Andrew's bedroom. From then on, Andrew had become paranoid and insisted on locking all doors, even when someone was at home. After breakfast, Andrew and Morse went to the sitting room where they chatted for an hour. Morse left to visit a relative at 8:45 a.m. and Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. When he returned at around 10:30 a.m., his key failed to open the door, so he knocked for attention. Bridget went to unlock the door. Finding it jammed, she uttered an expletive. She would later testify that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this. She didn't see Lizzie, but she stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. This was later considered significant because Abby's body was visible through the gap between bed and floor when climbing the stairs, only becoming hidden by the bed upon reaching the top. Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, and she had replied that a messenger had delivered a summons to visit a sick friend. Lizzie then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa for a nap. Next she informed Bridget of a department store sale and permitted her to go, but Bridget felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom instead. Lizzie gave two different accounts of what happened next. Originally she stated that she went to the barn to look for iron or tin to fix a door and remained in the loft for 20 to 30 minutes eating pears. Police were skeptical, finding it unlikely that anyone could stand the stifling heat of the loft for that long. They also reported finding no footprints in the dust. At the trial, Lizzie changed the story, saying that she had spent only 10 minutes in the barn hunting sinkers for a fishing trip her father was planning for the following week, then returned to the house to find her father dead. Investigation. Bridget Sullivan testified that she was in her third-floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie call from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." Andrew was slumped on a couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyeballs had been split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked. His still bleeding wounds suggested a quite recent attack. Lizzie's answers to the police officers' questions were at times strange and contradictory. Initially she reported hearing a groan, or a scraping noise, or a distress call, before entering the house, but 2 hours later she said she had heard nothing and entered the house not realizing that anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her. Bridget and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eyes level with the floor, when they looked into the guest room and saw Abby lying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Lizzie reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite Lizzie's attitude, and changing alibis, nobody bothered to check her for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was merely a cursory inspection. At the trial they admitted to not doing a proper search because Lizzie wasn't feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. In the basement, police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon as the handle looked like a fresh break and the ash and dust on the head, unlike that on the other bladed tools, appeared to have been deliberately applied to make it look as if it had been in the basement for some time. However, none of these tools were removed from the house. The sisters' friend, Alice Russell, decided to stay with them while John Moore spent the night in the attic guest room, contrary to later accounts that he slept in the murder site guest room. Police were stationed around the house, and later that night an officer saw Lizzie enter the basement and bend over the pails containing her parents' bloody clothing, an action never explained. The following night, Morse left the house and was swarmed by hundreds of people. Police had to escort him back to the house. On August 6, police conducted a more thorough search of the house, inspecting the sisters' clothing and confiscating the broken-handled hatchet head. That evening a police officer and a mayor visited the Bordens, and Lizzie was informed that she was a suspect in the murders. The next morning, Alice Russell entered the kitchen to find Lizzie Borden burning a dress on the fire. Lizzie explained that she was burning it because it was covered in paint. This may have been an innocent reaction to the anxiety of being suspected. It was never determined whether it was the actual dress she had been wearing on the day of the murders. Inquest. Lizzie appeared at the inquest hearing on August 8. Her request to have her family attorney present was refused under a state statute providing that an inquest may have been held in private. She had been prescribed regular doses of morphine to calm her nerves, and it is possible her testimony was affected by this. Lizzie's behavior was erratic, and she often refused to answer a question even if the answer would be beneficial to her. She often contradicted herself, such as claiming to have been in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then claiming to have been in the dining room doing some ironing, and then claiming to have been coming down the stairs. She had also claimed to have removed her father's boots and put slippers on him despite police photographs clearly showing Andrew wearing his boots. The district attorney was very aggressive and confrontational. On August 11, Lizzie was served with a warrant of arrest and jailed. The inquest testimony, the basis for the modern debate regarding her guilt or innocence, was later ruled inadmissible at her trial in June 1893. A grand jury began hearing evidence on November 7, and Lizzie was indicted on December 2. Trial. Lizzie's trial took place in New Bedford the following June. Prosecuting attorneys included future Supreme Court Justice William H. Moody. Defending were Andrew V. Jennings, Melvin O. Adams, and former Massachusetts Governor George D. Robinson. Prominent points in the trial included, the hatchet head found in the basement was not convincingly shown to be the murder weapon. Prosecutors argued that the killer had removed the handle because it was bloody, but while one officer testified that a hatchet handle was found near the hatchet head, another officer contradicted this. Though no bloody clothing was found, a few days after the murder Lizzie burned a dress in the stove, saying it had been ruined when she brushed against fresh paint. There was a similar axe murder nearby shortly before the trial, though its perpetrator was shown to have been out of the country when the Bordens were killed. Evidence was excluded that Lizzie had sought to purchase prussic acid from a local druggist on the day before the murders when the judge ruled that the incident was too remote in time to have any connection. Because of the mysterious illness that had struck the household before the murders, the family's milk and Andrew's and Abby's stomachs were tested for poison. None was found. The victims' heads were removed during autopsy. After the skulls were used as evidence during the trial Borden fainted upon seeing them. The heads were later buried at the foot of each grave. On June 20, after deliberating an hour and a half, the jury acquitted Borden. The trial has been compared to the later trials of Bruno Hauptmann, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, and O.J. Simpson as a landmark in publicity and public interest in the history of American legal proceedings. Other theories. No one else was charged in the murders, and they continue to be the subject of research and speculation. Among those suggested to be the killers by various authors are, Lizzie herself, despite her acquittal. One writer proposed that she committed homicide while in a fugue state, while mystery author Ed McBain, in his 1984 novel Lizzie, had Lizzie committing the slayings after being caught in a lesbian tryst with the maid. McBain elaborated on his theory on an episode of the 1999 film Garden Entertainment video series Case Reopened. He speculated that Mrs. Borden had caught Lizzie and maid Bridget Sullivan together and had reacted with horror and disgust, and that Lizzie had killed Mrs. Borden with a candlestick. When her father returned she had confessed to him, but he had reacted to her revelation of the affair exactly as Mrs. Borden had, and in a rage she had gotten one of the hatchets and killed him with it, with Bridget disposing of the hatchet somewhere afterward. Bridget Sullivan, perhaps in a rage at being ordered to clean windows on a hot day the day of the murders was unusually hot and while still recovering from the mystery illness that had struck the household. William Borden after failing to extort money from his father. Arnold Brown, the author of a book on this theory, mentions that William was in the horse meat trade, a butcher and slaughterer. Emma Borden, having established an alibi at Fairhaven, Massachusetts, comes secretly to Fall River to commit the murders and returns to Fairhaven to receive the telegram informing her of the murders. Subsequent life: after the trial, the sisters moved into a large, modern house in the neighborhood called The Hill in Fall River. Around this time, Lizzie began using the name Lizbeth A. Borden. At their new house, which Lizbeth named Maplecoft, the sisters had a staff that included live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Because Abby was ruled to have died before Andrew, her estate went first to Andrew and then, at his death, passed to his daughters as part of his estate. A considerable settlement, however, was paid to settle claims by Abby's family. Despite the acquittal, Lizbeth was ostracized by Fall River society. Lizbeth Borden's name was again brought into the public eye when she was accused of shoplifting in 1897 in Providence, Rhode Island. In 1905, shortly after an argument over a party that Lizbeth had given for actress Nancy Unile, Emma moved out of the house. She never saw her sister again. Lizbeth was ill in her last year following the removal of her gallbladder. She died of pneumonia on June 1, 1927 in Fall River. Funeral details were not published and few attended. 9 days later, Emma died from chronic nephritis at the age of 76 in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire, having moved to this location in 1923 both for health reasons and to get away from the public eye, which had renewed interest in the sisters at the publication of another book about the murders. The sisters, neither of whom had ever married, were buried side by side in the family plot in Oak Grove Cemetery. Lizbeth left $30,000 to the Fall River Animal Rescue League and $500 in trust for perpetual care of her father's grave. Her closest friend and a cousin each received $6,000 a year, substantial sums at the estate's distribution in 1933 during the Great Depression. Folk rhyme: the case was memorialized in a popular skipping rope rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Folklore says that the rhyme was made up by an anonymous writer as a tune to sell newspapers. Others attribute it to the ubiquitous, but anonymous, Mother Goose. In reality, Lizzie's stepmother suffered 18 or 19 blows. Her father suffered 11 blows. See also, A.J. Borden Building, Corky Row Historic District. In popular culture, Macabre released a song about Borden, simply called Lizzie Borden, on their Grim Scary Tales album. The Fall River Axe Murders, a short story by Angela Carter, Blood Relations, a play by Canadian playwright Sharon Pollock, based on the speculation as to whether or not Lizzie really did commit the murders. Fall River Legend, a 1948 ballet by choreographer Agnes de Mille, based on the life of Lizzie Borden, a 1965 opera based on the case, Lizzie Borden, a heavy metal band which is named after the woman and whose music is often themed with death and murder and violence that Borden was associated with. The Legend of Lizzie Borden, a 1975 ABC film based on the case. Nancy Unile, an actress who was a friend of Lizzie, Lizzie Borden, a song from the musical revue New Faces of 1952, popularized by the Chad Mitchell Trio. Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, a U.S. television movie premiering on Lifetime on January 25, 2014. The Bloody Banks of Fall River, an episode of the CBS radio series Crime Classics that aired on September 30, 1953, with Irene Tedrow portraying Lizzie. The Simpsons, Season 5 Episode 2, Cape Fear. Miss Krabappel states, "You're gonna be my murder victim, Bart." In the school production of Lizzie Borden, starring Martin as Lizzie. The scene continues on and shows Martin Prince dressed as Lizzie holding an axe saying 40 whacks with a wet noodle, Bart. A television episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Season 1 Episode 17, The Older Sister, Citations. Further reading, a number of works expounding the facts and different theories have been written about the crime. These include, Asher, Robert, Lawrence B. Goodhart and Alan Rogers. Murder on Trial, 1620 2002 New York, State University of New York Press, 2005, ISBN 978-0-7914-6377-2. Brown, Arnold. A Lizzie Borden, The Legend, The Truth, The Final Chapter. Nashville, Tennessee, Rutledge Hill Press, 1991, ISBN 1-55853-099-1. Davidson, Avram. The Deed of the Deft-Footed Dragon in several collections, most recently The Other 19th Century, ed. Granier Davis and Henry Vessels. New York. TOR, 2001, DeMille, Agnes. Lizzie Borden, A Dance of Death. Boston, Little, Brown and Colorado, 1968. Kent, David 40 Wax, New Evidence in the Life and Legend of Lizzie Borden. Yankee Books, 1992, ISBN 0-89909-351-5. Kent, David. The Lizzie Borden Sourcebook. Boston, Brandon Publishing Company, 1992, ISBN 0-8283-1950-2. King, Florence. WASP, Where is Thy Sting? Chapter 15, 1 WASP's Family, or the Ties That Bind. Stein and A., 1977, ISBN 0-552-99377-8. Lincoln, Victoria. A Private Disgrace, Lizzie Borden by Daylight. NY, G.P. Putnama Unregistered Trademark Sons, 1967, ISBN 0-930330-35-8. Martins, Michael and Dennis Binet. Parallel Lives, A Social History of Lizzie A. Borden and Her Fall River. Fall River Historical Society, 2011. 1,138 pages with much previously unavailable information including letters written by Lizzie Borden while in jail and photographs of her in later life. ISBN 978-0-9641248-1-3 Parallel Lives Official Website, Masterton, William L. Lizzie Didney Unregistered Trademark T. Do It. Boston, Brandon Publishing Company, 2000, ISBN 0-8283-2052-7. Pearson, Edmund Lester. Studies in Murder Ohio State University Press, 1924. Pearson, Edmund Lester. Trial of Lizzie Borden, edited, with a history of the case, Doubleday Doran, 1937. Main text is a transcript of the trial. Radine, Edward D. Lizzie Borden, The Untold Story Simon & Schuster, 1961. Rebello, Leonard. Lizzie Borden, Past and Present Alzac Press, 1999. David Rahak. Did Lizzie Borden Axe for It? Angel Dust Publishing, 2008. Spearing, Frank. Lizzie, The Story of Lizzie Borden. Dorset Press, 1991, ISBN 0-88029-685-2. Sullivan, Robert. Goodbye Lizzie Borden Brattleboro, Vermont, Stephen Green Press, 1974, ISBN 0-14-011416-5. External links, Lizzie Borden at Find a Grave, The Hatchet, The Journal of Lizzie Borden Studies, the Lizzie Andrew Borden Virtual Museum and Library, Lizzie Borden, Warps and Wefts News, articles and photos about the lady, the crime, the city and the era, Tattered Fabric, Fall Rivers Lizzie Borden, The Lights Are Warm and Colored on YouTube William Norfolk play performed by the St. Louis City Players, 1969, The Older Sister at the Internet Movie Database, a 1956 TV episode on Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Lizzie at the Internet Movie Database, a 2012 horror film, directed by David Dunn Jr.